This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githu-Yuot. It's Tuesday, December 10th. This is Africa 54. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed receives the Nobel Peace Prize for mending fences and forging peace with neighboring Eritrea. The Sudanese Prime Minister calls his country a success story in the making, but asks for global assistance to achieve his goals. And a closer look at how to improve preventive health care in Africa. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was presented with the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize Tuesday for his groundbreaking peacemaking efforts with longtime neighboring foe Eritrea. In a speech delivered in Oslo, Abiy praised the goodwill of the Eritrean president, Isaias Afwerki, and described the two countries' commitment to peace as ironclad. Since becoming prime minister in 2018, Abiy has implemented sweeping political reforms that garnered praise but opened long repressed wounds between Ethiopia's many ethnic groups. Abiy says his administration has released all political prisoners, shut detention facilities, and stopped jailing journalists. Here is a part of Abiy's Nobel acceptance speech.
We now strive to live with our neighbors in peace and harmony. The Horn of Africa today is a region of strategic significance. The global military superpowers are expanding their military presences in the area. Terrorist and extremist groups also seek to establish a foothold. We don't want the Horn to be a battleground for superpowers nor a hideout for the merchants of terror and brokers of despair and misery. We want the Horn of Africa to become a treasury of peace and progress.
Critics of Abiy say his attempts to impose unity, including forming a single national political party, are doomed, given that Ethiopia's 105 million citizens belong to more than 80 ethnic groups. U.S. Representative Frederica Wilson continues to draw attention to the remaining 112 Chibok girls still being held captive by the Boko Haram terrorist group. She recently hosted a forum in Washington where a former Boko Haram abductee was in attendance. VOA's Grace Oyenubi reports.
The missing Chibok girls are never out of the mind of U.S. Representative Frederica Wilson, as she continues to remind the world of the girls abducted almost 6 years ago.
Why is everyone so quiet?
She recently spoke at a forum hosted at the Library of Congress called Educate a Girl, Empower a Nation.
To keep the story of the Chibok girls alive, every Wednesday we wear red. I insist that members of the Congressional Black Caucus and those who will join us wear red. We take pictures and we post them all on social media to say that we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting until we bring back all of our girls. We now have 112 who are still missing, but we will never, ever give up until all 112 are accounted for.
Aisha Sese, journalist and advocate for the Chibok girls, was among those who led the reporting of the Chibok story during her time at CNN. She authored a book, Beneath the Tamarind Tree, that chronicled the missing girls of Boko Haram. She spoke at the forum on her motivation for the book.
The story isn't over, because I think that there has been a failing on the part of all of us, even those of us who covered the story right at the beginning, to fully humanize the girls who were taken, to fully bring to life who they were, their dreams, the path they were on, their families, and what their families are going through for those whose children aren't back. And I think that the world should be made aware of that. And the world should also understand that, you know, our children matter.
I thought most people have forgotten about.
Patience Bulus, one of 57 girls who escaped by jumping off the back of a moving truck after being abducted, is now undergoing the Dickinson College Bridge program in the U.S. She explained how education has impacted her.
I think education is really powerful because before I come here, I don't even know how to speak English, but because of education, it gives me voice to speak. Because right now, if you're not an educated person, no one is going to listen to what you're saying. But if you get a good education, everything you said, it will matter to people.
I think when you educate a boy, you educate that boy. When you educate a girl, you educate the girl, you educate the family, and you educate the globe. And so it is important for us to make sure that girls have access to good education.
Representative Wilson will not rest until all of the 276 schoolgirls seized in 2014 at their school in Borno State are returned safely home. Grace Oyenubi, VOA News, Washington.
Sudanese Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok says his nation is, quote, a victim of terrorism, and he is pledging to team up with the United States to fight the menace. Hamdok made the comments at an event here in Washington. VOA's Salem Solomon has our report.
During his recent visit to Washington, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok said one goal looms above all others as he leads the country's transitional government, bringing peace to the war-ravaged nation.
Our number one and top priority is to stop the war and build the foundation of sustainable peace, essentially to stop the sufferings of our people in the IDP camps and refugee camps. We think the opportune time of stopping this war is now.
Hamdok did not specify which war he meant. Sudan's government has been fighting rebels in the Darfur, South Kordofan and Blue Nile regions for years. The capital, Khartoum, saw deadly conflicts between protesters and the military earlier this year. He did say he was heartened by the resiliency on display when he visited the Zamzam camp for internally displaced people in Darfur, where war that began in 2003 has never entirely stopped.
Our people in the IDP camps, with all the sufferings and the miseries they went through, it taught them, educated them, and made them strong enough to be able to say, from now onwards, we know what is good for ourselves, and nobody can dictate on us anything. This is very liberating.
Unlike the administration of his predecessor, Omar al-Bashir, Hamdok's government has pledged to allow unfettered access to aid organizations to reach those in need. Hamdok spoke at the Atlantic Council, a foreign policy think tank in Washington. He visited the American capital in an effort to repair Sudan's relationship with the U.S., which was strained to non-existent during the entire 30-year reign of former Sudan President Omar al-Bashir, who the military ousted in April after months of mass protests. One of Hamdok's goals is for the U.S. to remove Sudan from the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Sudan was put on the list in 1993 at a time when Al-Qaeda founder Osama bin Laden was living in Khartoum. Although Sudan is still on the list, the two countries agreed to resume diplomatic relations and exchange ambassadors. U.S. officials have said the process of removing Sudan from the terrorism list will be a long one. Hamdok stressed that his country is prepared to meet the requirements, which may include paying restitution to victims of terrorist attacks.
We are Sudanese as a people. We've never supported terrorism or any of that sort. It was the former regime that supported this. So we are getting into a better understanding on this file. You know, we are also, as a nation, victims of terrorism that inflicted on us by the former regime. But we accepted this as a corporate responsibility. And we are negotiating. We have a team actually here in New York from our side, negotiating with our counterparts from the State Department very well. And I think we're making progress in this.
Hamdok, an economist and diplomat who has worked for the UN, was named the country's transitional prime minister in August. In deference to the leading role women played in the revolution, Hamdok made history by naming 4 women to his cabinet. Wala Isham Abdurrahman is a minister of youth and sports and was an activist who participated in sit-ins and street protests. She and other activists faced live fire and tear gas and were forced to go into hiding in between protests in fear of reprisals from security forces.
It was very dangerous. But the more that they were more aggressive, the more that we went to the street. That's why we went so far and we managed to achieve this.
Now, Abdul Rahman and others are seeking to institute a series of changes, including legal and political reforms, paving the way for a democratic, free and fair elections in 2022.
The road is not easy, but I think we went so far and we're very determined to reach to the final, destination of this transitional period. Because I always say that these 3 years is part of the revolution. It's another level. We finished, the level of protesting and marching. Now we need to build the new Sudan.
Salim Salman, VOA News, Washington.
Enset is a staple in the Ethiopian highlands where the pulp is used to make bread and porridge. Botanists and chefs predict it will soon be in high international demand because of its superfood properties. Lucy Fielder has our report.
It's a superfood you may never have heard of, but Enset, often described as banana on steroids, is a staple for millions of people in Ethiopia's highlands. Martha Daniel harvests the plant at her farm in Sidama Zone. She uses it for food for her family and sells the surplus at a nearby market.
I will take pulp and bury it in a pit. Then I will mix it and knead it with my hands. It will be put together and sealed with leaves. After a while, it will turn into a pulp. It is taken from there and made ready for food in different forms. It can be baked like a flatbread or molded into a potato-shaped roll of food. You can take along this food in a container when going on a journey.
While Enset can be turned into bread and porridge, it's also used in construction materials, packaging, cattle feed and medicine. Scientists say the plant could be a lifesaver for a warming world, especially because it's drought tolerant. But while Enset has been successfully domesticated in Ethiopia, the plant grows wild in other parts of the region, all the way down to South Africa. Scientists say they're now working on DNA sequencing hundreds of these varieties and hope the plant could one day boost food security in other African countries.
It's lunchtime in D.C. That looks good. That was Lucy Fielder of Reuters reporting. Now, we're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, improving access to preventive care on the continent. You're watching Africa 54, and we'll be right back.
We're talking about the news and issues you're talking about, sharing stories of development and growth across Africa, around the world, and in our lives. Topics that inform, empower, and change the rules. It's time for Our Voices with me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick,
and Hadiza Kiari,
and Ayan Bior,
and Orion Itangi Shaka.
It's time for Our Voices.
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. This Cape Town sushi restaurant is taking advantage of recent changes in South African cannabis legislation. Here at the Blowfish restaurant, Chef John Wu uses cannabidiol, or CBD, in a sushi sauce. A May 2019 exemption in the Medicines Act allows for the legal trade in cannabidiol. Meanwhile, the Constitutional Court has allowed for possession, use, and cultivation of cannabis by adults for use in private, without stipulating how much a person may possess. Cannabis legalization, as with many other countries, is in a flux, with new legislation expected imminently. Next up, the carefree Asian elephants of Whipsnade Zoo are taking part in a high-tech project aimed at protecting their endangered species from conflict with man. Working with Aribada Conservation Tech Initiative, the zoo is using machine learning to automatically recognize the thermal image of an Asian elephant. This high-tech early warning system will send alerts to communities that an elephant is nearby. The aim is to reduce surprise human-elephant encounters, which are often the cause of elephants injuring humans, and perhaps in retaliation or fear, humans hurting elephants. Up to 300 people in India are killed each year by human-elephant conflict, according to the World Wildlife Fund. And finally, it's another glistening and glittery Christmas when it comes to holiday decor and tables this year. Anything that sparkles and shines is trending. This year, pastels are in when it comes to creating your own personal winter wonderland. It's all about warm, soft accents in baby pink, turquoise, cerulean blue, blush, and white. Accents this year are also on pearl decorations in every shape and form. The National Retail Federation expects retail sales in December to grow overall between 3.8 and 4.2%. And that's what's trending today.
This major news out of the U.S. Capitol Tuesday. House Democrats unveiled 2 articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump, accusing him of abusing his office for personal political gain and obstructing the congressional impeachment inquiry. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerrold Nadler told reporters in Washington that Democrats had to take action because Trump had endangered the U.S. Constitution.
Today, in service to our duty to the Constitution and to our country, the House Committee on the Judiciary is introducing 2 articles of impeachment charging the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, with committing high crimes and misdemeanors. The first article is for abuse of power. It is an impeachable offense for the President to exercise the powers of his public office to obtain an improper personal benefit while ignoring or injuring the national interest. That is exactly what President Trump did when he solicited and pressured Ukraine to interfere in our 2020 presidential election, thus damaging our national security, undermining the integrity of the next election, and violating his oath to the American people. These actions, moreover, are consistent with President Trump's previous invitations of foreign interference in our 2016 presidential election.
Nadler says Trump has undermined the integrity of the 2020 election, and Trump is only the 4th U.S. president to ever face impeachment. It's time for a health report, and joining us now is Africa54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on global efforts to eradicate tuberculosis, right?
That's right, Esther. The World Health Organization's Stop TB Partnership has just launched its global plan to end tuberculosis from 2018 to 2022. Among its aspirations, the plan calls for $2.6 billion per year for research and development of new tuberculosis diagnostic tools, new drug regimens, and a new vaccine, as well as $13 billion per year for TB care care and prevention. The Pediatric Drug-Resistant TB Initiative was also launched to address the challenges of access to proper treatments for children infected with TB. In 2018, 10 million people fell ill from tuberculosis, including 1 million children under age 15. 32,000 of these children had drug-resistant TB. The global plan aims to put 40 million people on treatment for TB by 2022, including 3.5 million children and 1.5 million people with drug-resistant TB. Now, a new report by the WHO and the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates that in 2018, over 140,000 people, mainly children, died from measles worldwide. 5 countries, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Liberia, Madagascar, Somalia, and Ukraine, accounted for 45% of all measles cases in 2018. And there has already been a 3-fold increase in the number of measles cases reported as of mid-November 2019 compared to the same period in 2018. Measles is a highly contagious disease, and unvaccinated young children are at greatest risk of contracting measles and suffering its complications, including death. In the DRC, 250,000 people have been infected this year, more than 3 times the number of measles cases reported in the country in 2018. And challenges include poor infrastructure, a lack of access to routine health care, and shortages of vaccines.
We would spend 2 or 3 months without having any cases. But during the epidemic, we started to record 2 cases, 1 case a day, and so on. That was during the epidemic. Before the epidemic, cases were rare. We showed to the population the advantage of the vaccination. A vaccinated child is a protected child. Even if the epidemic appears suddenly, he will always be protected.
Observers say measles response efforts in the DRC have been largely hampered by competing priorities, including the Ebola response. UNICEF and its partners are conducting measles vaccination campaigns in the hardest hit areas, as well as providing medical supplies for treatment. Preventive care is any medical service that defends against health emergencies. It includes doctor visits such as annual physicals, well women appointments, and dental cleanings. Some medicines such as immunizations and allergy medications are preventive. Dr. Crispin Semakula, internal medicine specialist, discusses some ways of improving preventive care in Africa.
Health is sort of a complex dimension of multiple things, from prevention into actually taking care of acute medical problems that arise as a result of the fairly indifferent aspect of our life as the way we were created by God, disease from infection to etc. And I think the need for healthcare in general, especially particularly in the continent of Africa, where small amount of healthcare practitioners relative to the population, the biggest need is to focus on preventive care, to prevent people from getting diseases and keeping them healthy before they get diseases, because acute care just takes care of the secondary problem. In Africa, we do need to build our public health system, education in every aspect, not just of our healthcare provider, but the population, the community, in order to combat a lot of disease and not people getting into acquiring these diseases that at the end cost the government and the country and people a lot of money and life, etc.
Prevention is better than cure, as they say. It seems like not a lot of emphasis is put on prevention.
It is talked about, even in Africa, but it's just our resources are allocated into combating disease, and I guess because of issues with access to resources that you have to provide to the population, I think as our societies and our government are becoming more able to support healthcare system in the country, then we can move towards allocating more resources towards primary prevention. rather than treating disease. And therefore, training and developing primary care doctors like me as an internist, my main responsibility really as a physician, a clinician, is to manage people in an outpatient setting, preventing from taking care of their acute illnesses such as infection to chronic disease with their diabetes and high blood pressure, in order to prevent all those consequences of those diseases such as stroke, heart attack that we eventually tend to see in our communities, because that's the level we see people. That's the level we take care of people, not on day-to-day their hypertensive is managed.
For someone like you who is able to work in the system in the United States, what kind of lessons do you think can be learned from this approach in prevention?
Public education. Even in a hospital setting, as an acute care doctor who manages patients who are hospitalized, when they come to the hospital, we do everything to try to deal with the primary problem they come in, but also educate in terms of how preventing and also connecting them back to on continuum of care in outpatient setting where they will see a doctor on a regular basis, and create a system that allow those level of care to be accessible, educate the population, because like in Tanzania, I have friends and relatives who can afford, in a sense, because they have health insurance to get preventive primary care, but there's no awareness as much, where you gotta be, for almost everybody, that you have to see your doctor at least once a year, get checked for these things, follow the lifestyle. So those are some of the things that in particular Tanzania is working on and should continue to work on those efforts.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Lenore Moudou. Esther?
Thank you very much, Lenore. Very informative right there. Thank you. All right, be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health report every Tuesday on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.